done. So, wait, you were about to say something. We were about to dive into something
Oh, I
about
think we're about to
fuel
talk about
prices. Oh, Europe.
yeah,
I
fuel
was in
prices.
I was in Washington State, and
Yeah,
they had never had such a warm summer. And
right.
so what none of the buildings had was AC units. And they saw me, they're like, "Hey, you're from Florida. Tell me about air conditioning." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they were and it was just this consistent conversation, and so much so that they put signs at the Best Buy, and the sign
Mhm.
said, "Attention, we're out of air conditioning units." Now, in Florida, they don't sell window air conditioning units. Like every house comes with them. But what's weird is that you're having, I mean, is this uncommon to be this cold in September in Boston?
It's not. I think last September, even through like maybe the first week of October, it was pretty warm. Like, 70s, even went into the 80s a little bit. And
Mhm.
last Sunday, I went on a bike ride and it was 75, 76, maybe even like,
Wow.
I mean, low 80s, maybe like 82, I think it was. I think it was 82
Wow.
when we went. I mean, it was warm. And I wake up today and it is 42 and feels
Jeez.
like 40. So, I mean, that's 8
42
degrees away
feels
from
like 40.
yeah, and that's 8 degrees away from freezing. And so anyways, we were talking about gas prices because I
Yeah.
know Europe's gonna be slammed because of the war in the Ukraine, because Russia's basically gonna turn off the tap. And a lot of countries are also not going to, from what I understand, are not going to want to be seen taking Russian oil just
Mm,
because that's going to fuel their economy, and we're trying to keep them at arm's length economically to
yeah.
hopefully punish them for having invaded Ukraine. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play out over the world, because the northern hemisphere could be very, very in trouble if all of a sudden your fuel prices are up 3 times to keep heat going. So
Hmm.
I'm interested, and one of the reasons why I think Jay is still not with us is, it's just a hunch, because it's why it took me so long to get logged in today, was just because it was so cold in the morning. And when it's
Yeah.
really that cold, you don't really want to get out of out of your bed. So that's just that's a working hypothesis at this point.
It's it's
There's no
it's
empirical data there.
6:30 a.m. It's
6:30 a.m.
75 degrees outside. You
Gotta
like
love
if
it.
we walked outside together, you'd be sweating. I wouldn't, but you would be. And we're expecting a hurricane. Like
Oh yeah.
the humidity is, what are we even thinking about here? I would take that any day of the week though. And you guys are about, not you guys, but the Northeast is about to get hit by a hurricane up there. Nova Scotia or whatever it is that still happening?
I don't know. Could be. I
No.
know that there's a hurricane that's coming for the Gulf Coast, so I'm sure Houston's preparing. I'm not sure if that's the same one you guys are going to hit by, but
Yeah,
you know,
that's coming to us.
we are in the eye of hurricane season. Um,
You ready for
but
this?
I am
90% humidity.
right now.
Where I'm
But here,
at.
okay. But if we're talking about humidity,
Yeah.
and welcome everyone if you're watching from wherever you're watching, we're talking weather
From
right now.
wherever you are.
We are going to get to some topics about small business for Small Business Saturday, or whatever we're calling this segment. But let me look at. I think our humidity is actually fairly high too. Let me look.
60%.
62%. Yeah,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, I mean, you know,
It's
it
not
will.
Denver.
No, no, it's not. It's not. You can tell we're not up in the mountains and that we're on the coast. Um, Do we want to pivot here and talk about? I think that there were some really good
Yeah.
ideas. You post some really good ideas in the chat.
Well, let's
Uh,
start with everyone. So, everyone who's just checking in on Saturday, if you've checked with us before, what we've been doing the last 2 weekends is on Saturday morning, we want to get together and do several things, hit several check boxes. And one is we want to build what we're building in the open,
mhm.
because everyone's saying the crypto markets are down, the TradFi markets are down. What should we do? People are wringing their hands. And the message that people talk a lot about is, well, now's the time everyone gets down and builds. And then you ask people, and it's like, they're not building shit. And so, what the guys and I are the not crypto bros and are trying to do is build. And so, we want to build in the open. So, we talked about that this week. And then, what were some of the topics? I mean, we've been coaching Jay on Jay's business, and that pivoted. So, how have things changed?
How have things changed? I think. I really wish Jay were here to speak on that because I'm sure
Yeah.
his initial idea has already morphed a lot.
Yeah.
But I think I shared with you guys, and let me see if we can pull it up, or let me see if I can pull it up and just read it out. I shared with you guys something, and it comes full circle to the prompt here, that it was something I saw on LinkedIn, and it was, ooh, I'm looking. It was a list of all these companies that had started as, A, and ended up as X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was absolutely perfect for us to
Like they
see.
started in one industry and ended up in a
Bizarro world.
bizarro world. So, and by the way, if you're bopping in, we want to hear your comments of what your business is, because Jarrett has a master's and a vast amount of experience. I've been doing entrepreneurship for 20 years. Jay is kind of just starting out as an entrepreneur journey, but he touches a lot of businesses. He services a lot of people. He serves a lot of people and services their businesses. He doesn't service a lot of people. Too early for that. But go ahead. What do you got there? Tell me some of these companies that started at X and ended up at Y.
Yeah, so I shared this with you, and it was actually Blossom who had shared it on his
Oh yeah,
yeah, on his account, but it was a share from this guy, and it said, Slack started out as a video game, YouTube started as a dating
yeah,
site, Twitter
yeah,
started as a podcast finder,
yep,
uh, Shopify started as an e-commerce store. I don't really
yeah.
know how it's anything but that, but maybe we could talk
Yeah,
about
its
that.
own store. It sold its own products.
Oh, got you.
Yeah,
Pinterest started as an m-commerce app, and the lesson is listen to your customers. And I think the
yeah,
lesson is also like, yeah, so listen to your customers. Like the market and the demand is going to tell you
yeah,
where your energy is best served. And so Jay's idea originally is a place for Web3 podcasts to kind of have its own platform and spotlight. And I think that that's still holding true. But if we are able to kind of onboard a bunch of different brands and podcasts and audio entertainment things onto the platform, I think at some point you say, okay, this is working for Web3 podcasts. Why don't we just open it up to other different types of podcasts? It doesn't need to be exclusive to Web3. I think Web3 is still a niche. Hey, Allison, good morning.
Hey,
Allison's actually
Allison. Allison is an impact maker over in the UK. I checked you out, Allison, and I was super impressed. You're doing a lot of cool stuff, and I think you even posted, and it corresponds to Not Crypto Bros. She just received, I think, a Not Your Bro NFT. Tell us about that in the comments. We'd love to hear about that. Keep going, Jared.
Yeah. Tell us about that in comments. And Jessica, good morning. And she says, yeah, and Facebook was just for college peeps. Exactly. And I've talked about
That's
that,
right.
I think, on this show before, but I was one of the, as Grant jokes, I was actually one of the first couple million people on Facebook just because I happened to be in college in the fall of
Facebook user
2005.
14.
Yeah, Facebook user 12. I happened to be in college in the year 2005 and had my .edu. And so it's exactly that, right? It's exactly that. If you're
Yeah.
building a product, especially a digital product, and you're going to put it out there, it's going to morph a lot. It's going to change. And so I think the Web3 podcast network, it may start as that, but then it may just like, I don't know, take over a large segment of Spotify, or take over a larger segment
Yeah.
of something else that's already built, and maybe even morph into something else. I mean, I think that there's a huge, and I'm going to throw this out to you, I think there's a huge need, as someone who is single, for like a Web3 dating thing where you can only
Niche
get
stuff.
in where,
Niche
yeah,
stuff.
where you can see someone's profile
Mhm.
about who they are, but then it
Wow.
also attaches their NFTs so you can kind of see what they're into in
To
real
the viewers,
time.
dude, everyone's verified. Everyone has their MetaMask. So we're
Everyone's
talking, for those who just
yes.
popped in, we're talking about the potential. I like this, for a niche dating app for crypto users, so that there's no shame, but like you get verified, you get a hex or a blue check verified. But like, so for those watching, I want to hear what you would call what you would call the Web3 dating app. So if we could think about that throughout the show, the best idea, we'll send you a gift from the best idea. I like, but you're right. The niche thing is so there. In For those who don't know, real quick, Allison commenting on Not Your Bro, she had 5 Not Your Bros stolen from her wallet, scammed, and an amazing NFT member gave her one of theirs for free. It was amazing, and I've only glazed or I've only like glanced at the Not Your Bros movement, and we were joking about doing a Not Crypto Bro shirt called Not Your Bro. But when I saw your project, of course, I want to respect that other project, not your bros. So maybe we should, maybe not Crypto Bros needs to go buy a not your bro and just rep that, just show love. So Allison, I'm sorry you got scammed. That's horrible. I would rather get in a fight than get stolen from. But um, for those who don't know, last week I shared with the guys that I spoke with a venture capitalist who validated this idea of niching this Web3 um, podcast app that Jay had idealized. And it was hugely validating to say, hey, listen, this is my guy's idea. We build in the open. He said, that's great. He said, I'm also working on something parallel. There's our guy. There's our guy. I'm also working. Good morning, sleepy butt.
Wow. Buenos dias, senor.
now, Allison's in the UK. Allison,
I wasn't even asleep. I was lying down.
Oh my gosh.
Jared
was convinced.
Asleep. I was just lying down. Dude, you don't need these high school excuses there, Jay.
I wasn't
asleep. I just had my eyes closed.
Yeah, I was just resting. My eyes were on vacation. I was on the clock.
Didn't know.
So what we were saying was we talked to this venture capitalist last week, and they validated this idea of niche. And I think niching is going to happen. But here's when niching happens. Hyper niching happens like broad scale when a technology is too slow to pivot while the public gets generally the concept and they want to benefit from it. So like you said, like Web3 dating apps, like why doesn't Bumble or Hinge have a whole category that allows you to indicate I'm into Web3 and people can filter that way? It's an easy feature, but they don't do that. So you're looking for a niche app. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I actually think that that's really great because when you're on these apps, you get to choose like how far away someone is from you. Some people height is a super important thing. So you're going to throw that in. You can now like niche down to like religion. Cause some people, if they're super religious or they're not religious, or if they're kind of exploring, those things can be really important as you start to build a relationship with someone, their spirituality or their, their religious. So it would make sense that it's like, yeah, I'm into tech. And then you could niche down from there and be like, I'm really into blockchain. Cause I think I've told you guys before on this, but when I talk to people now about my podcast, I normally don't say, hey, I have a crypto podcast, because apparently it's super triggering for some people. So I just say, oh yeah, I have 2 tech podcasts and then I have a sports podcast. Yeah. I keep it at the tech, and then I'll go to blockchain, and then I'll use crypto, because as we've known, crypto is super,
I wonder if you could have like a rubric, like as someone shows interest, they're like, in passing, I have 2 tech podcasts, and like, well, what type of tech? And then you go, well, I have a digital asset tech podcast, and I talk about digital assets and investing and digital asset business building. And then if you're like, well, what about? And then you could probably go in, but you've already contextualized them a little bit, like, oh, I didn't even think about this in terms of digital assets. And it's like, well, it might seem a little more legit, I guess. If I were hyping you in a bar in New York City for the first time, that's what I'd say. My dude's got a.
I think you're right. And one of the other things is, I don't know. A lot of things come back to the Peace Corps because it was such a big moment in my life. From 22 to 25, I was out in communities working. And one of the things that when you come back from the Peace Corps, they try to tell you is going to happen, and you hear and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to happen. And then you're not ever prepared for it because you can't prepare for this, is that you've had this 2-year experience or this year-long experience. It's changed you so much, and the world has changed and everything's changed because you've changed. Yeah. And you come back and they say, hey, no matter who it is, even if it's your parents, your family, your siblings, your loved one, even a spouse or whatever, you're going to have 3 sentences to talk about what you do. Yeah. And that's it. And I know that sounds rough, but that's it. 'Cause people just aren't going to they're not going to know what you're talking about. Yeah. And so I feel the same way about the podcast. I normally give them 1, because if I go from tech to blockchain down to crypto, I've lost them. Yeah. And depending upon, the context where we meet, the age, like I might throw out crypto if I think it's appropriate. And I love that you put Impact Consultant International Development, because I'm back, baby. I'm back.
You are.
He's back.
You work for the Mercy Corps.
Yes, I do.
You
it's
start
very
Monday,
exciting.
Right?
No, it starts next Monday. So I have this whole week off to
another week.
Yeah, to kind of prepare and honestly get my stuff together. Because if you're watching on LinkedIn, I have so many LinkedIn messages I need to go through and so many podcasts I need to schedule. And
Yes.
Allison, as Grant said when you first kind of popped up here, I also was checking you out on the profile. It looks awesome. You're doing a lot of great stuff, and I need to
We should have her
continue
on the
to.
show and tell us about her projects, man.
Yeah, I need to continue to learn from you because I think that's what Web3 is about, is you linking up with people that are doing something and figuring
Yeah.
out what they're doing, and that's going to help you learn. Web3 is like college without professors. You're just learning from the other students, which is amazing. So
And the classroom is still sorting out, like, there's the jocks who are like, there's no teacher, I'm out. And then there's the nerds who are like, I've been trying to get direction, I don't have direction. And then there's the in-betweeners who are like, should we just lead ourselves? And it's like, I guess we should just lead ourselves. There's some textbooks, let's go. And just taking turns teaching,
exactly. So actually, Grant, before we go back to I think where we were headed with some of the Web3 podcast network and build in the open, Web3 for the people, by the people. Yes, exactly. I want to ask Jay, when he was laying down but not sleeping. This is perfect as he yawns. I absolutely
Oh,
love
boy.
this. Was it the cold? Because Jay, I only logged in about 3 minutes before we went live because it's so cold here that I was like, dude, I'm not moving. I'm just not. Not Crypto Bros can find me in my bed. Like I'll put the laptop on my ceiling and it'll just like show me because it's just too cold. Was that at all a factor in your tardiness to class today?
I honestly just forgot that we were doing this. I was lying down, and I'm
Hashtag
thinking
build
like,
in the
oh,
open. I forgot that I have a venture I'm working on.
it's Saturday, and that's all that I was
Allison
thinking.
remembered
Like,
the show. Allison.
Yeah, Allison got up. I know she's in the UK, but she was ready. She was ready, Jay.
I'm sorry,
I
Allison.
appreciate your honesty. This is what I
Me
like
too.
about Web3 is there's a radical honesty that actually is more entertaining than like sketchy, So I really appreciate that. What were you thinking about? And then we'll move on with what we've been building this week or what progress we've made. What were you thinking about? If you were not
I
sleeping,
honestly, I was thinking about a podcast. Our guy, Roger Williams.
Yeah.
Roger Williams.
yeah.
Yeah, so we were working on getting an idea for a mini series for him. So I was sitting there thinking about that.
Let's hype that.
While
I
lying
mean,
down
so
and
for those who
thinking
don't
about
know,
it.
Roger Williams is working on an awesome project. Wait, what does Allison say here? I want a laughing face to hit at this point instead of a clap. That was so funny. So a button on LinkedIn that's just I think there's laughter in LinkedIn, I think.
Yeah, you can
Somewhere.
do when you like something, you can choose like laughter, I think. But I think I agree. There needs to just be like when you're
This is
watching
just
a
a clap.
stream, you can just because you know how like on YouTube or Instagram, you can be like
Yeah.
heart, 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 love, 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 like.
Yeah,
So
Yeah. Oh, they're right.
the
Like if
laughing
you look at
face,
the
the
live,
emojis. Yeah,
yeah, if you look at the live, it doesn't have the laughter. There's a laughter on other posts, but not that one. I'm with you. Well, but back to Roger Williams, this would make an extraordinary miniseries. Because he's just an interesting character, but also because the technology that they're doing could actually be a groundbreaking technology that in the bull market really gets attention as like beyond 5G. In fact, problem solving for a lot of 5G with Li-Fi. So that's really fun that you were working that through, man. Jay's the man, always working through content. So
yeah.
real quick, guys, we worked this week a little bit on our project. What, Jared?
Jay's got so many podcasts. He's missing a live podcast he should be on, thinking about a podcast he's not doing yet. I mean, that's
He's like,
just
I got an
4D
idea for a
chef shit, bro.
podcast. I could hang out with my friends and talk about building in the open. That would be awesome. Wait a
Wouldn't that
minute.
be crazy? Oh. I also assume Jay sleeps in that chair.
Yeah.
So when he said he was sleeping, he was just like this.
No, what
For the
wasn't
public
asleep,
watching,
but-
for the public watching, how many podcasts are you managing now?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, maybe
6?
10. I don't know, something like that.
There's so many he can't count. They're
He's on
like
he's on
puppies at a
Trudeau's
rescue
Council for
center. He's got
Podcasting.
so many. He's like, two came in last night. I don't know.
All right. And when we launch the W3 Podcast Network, we'll actually be responsible for dozens. Hint, hint, what we're building, which would be awesome. So, guys, who wants to give a summary of what we built this week, or how far we've made it, or what we're talking about? Allison decided to give her own emojis.
Thank you, Allison. Well, actually, I think Jay, before you hopped on, Grant and I were just kind of reviewing where we have been with the Web3 Podcast Network and how it kind of was your thing, and then you were like, hey, do you guys want to like hop on board? We can kind of do it together, and then we're like, okay, great, we'll build in the open, and we're gonna kind of use Saturdays to build in the open. But I wanted to ask you how you think the evolution, because we were talking about, I shared the tweet that I think Blossom had put up that was like, all these companies started as X and turned it out to be YZ.
Oh, yeah.
Twitter started to be a podcast finder, but now is like not. YouTube started out as I think a dating site or something, and now is video. So where are you? Does it seem like a normal evolution of where the Web3 Podcast Network idea has even gone, even in the last like 3 or 4 weeks? And yeah, how are you feeling since Grant and I have kind of come into the hen house and shaking things up here?
No, I feel really good about it. Like I was telling you guys even before, like the stuff that you bring to the table is the ability to explore these ideas. Like when we talk about this stuff, I've thought about it before, but I'm like one person, so my mind is just like I'll just do the one thing that I know how to do, or I think I have the resources to accomplish. But when you have more people, now you can explore some of the other avenues that maybe you can't on your own. So for me, I'm pretty excited about it.
If you want to go far, what is it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. Right? That quote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was your thought there, Jarrett? Though you were going to riff on something Jay said.
No, I had a similar sentiment to the one that you had,
Mm-hmm.
and that's that whenever you're building anything, the more opinions you have around, the better, I think, in general. But it also slows progress, but it also refines things more. So you're less likely for there to be probably a bad market product or market service fit in the future. At least that's the idea. But one of the things that I actually think that, as far as the building in the open, as we move forward with this, we should ask people whether they come on here and we ask them about our idea. We should bring on non-Web3 people, because at some semblance of this, it needs to be able to be something that would work not just for Web3 people. It's going to, the niche is Web3 to start. And I say that because that would really focus in on like the overall, is this going to be interesting for any niche community? Because it kind of needs to be eventually, right? But we're starting with Web3 because we're so Web3, and I believe we are, at least the three of us, so for example, like very few people are thinking about just a Web3 exclusive podcast network, because very few people can name more than one podcast that has to do with crypto, Bitcoin, NFTs, or anything. So it's like, why are you building an entire house for clowns when I don't even know what a clown is? So anyways, I think that would be potentially interesting to bring people in and just focus on the high level idea. Because in theory, I think this could probably apply for almost any niche, but I'm not sure. I'm open to what you guys think. I'm just saying, like, if you can sell an idea, like if I can explain an NFT to someone who's never heard about it and make it sound good, then I've done a really good idea framing it, I think.
I think that's already kind of going that way. So for those who don't know, this Wednesday, Jay had Jarrett and I on he basically has a 30-day podcasting challenge. And on that 30-day podcasting challenge, we just kind of shared some of our experiences, and they shared with us, hold on, I'm also writing. They shared with us their podcast. And it was interesting to meet with these people because it dawned on me at some point, I was talking a lot of Web3, and it dawned on me that these might not be Web3 people. And in that micro moment, I realized that what we're working on is we will start, especially with the marketing language of the Web3 or crypto podcast network. But in all honesty, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that we had discussed a lot about is in the end, we're infopreneurs empowering other people with a message that happens to currently use the medium of podcasting. But we also now know that the medium of podcasting, like Anchor and Spotify, now enables video podcasts. So are those vlogs or are those podcasts? The umbrella is shifting, and it brings nuance. Like I like what Jay's doing with his desire to do cinematic storytelling through podcasting. That's brilliant. But like, what about people like Andrea, your Italian student, who wants to do like courseware and like traditional podcasting, or Jessica Yang, who was on with us in your 30-day challenge on Wednesday. And she like, we assumed she was doing real estate or crypto. And she's like, none of that. And you're like, okay. And it's going to be like a true podcast. So I think what we're planning on doing with W3 Podcast Network is actually already expanding, especially with some of the ideas that we had touched on. I don't know. What do you think? Am I off base there?
Well, I think you're right, and that's kind of why we actually named it W3, right? Like from Web3 to W3. The idea is it's a bit more open, a bit more general, so that you can fit in things like just general storytelling that is necessarily connected with Web3.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense for a lot of people because you still want to have just some everyday things that are included, just so you can get people in and then get them introduced to Web3. But I think it's still important for us to sort of hold on to our roots and the stuff that brought us together initially, which is crypto and blockchain and Web3.
I wanna bring up something here because this is what's happening that I'm seeing on the social media landscape. And I only want to talk about social media just as a medium, right? For me, social media, it's just another medium
Yeah.
to share your message with the world. We
Mhm.
used to have radio, then we had TV, now we have the internet. And on the internet sits a bunch of different things. You have Spotify, you have Instagram, you have YouTube, you have TikTok, you have a whole host of ways for anyone to share their message, a brand, an individual person. And I was looking last night, this video popped up in my YouTube algorithm because YouTube knows you better than you know yourself. And it was talking about this new, exactly, yes, the medium is the message. It was talking about this new app, and I wanted to know if people have heard of it. And there's two apps that are coming up right now, which I think are going to compete with Instagram, or they're trying to compete with Instagram. One is called Vero, and it kind of goes back to the main idea of what Instagram was, which is focusing on photos. And it's interesting. And I actually dropped a article link for you guys in the WhatsApp in our group chat because I thought it was interesting. I think it's interesting that people are trying to compete with Instagram and add different things. And one of the things that this does is it allows you more easily to like choose your audience, which I thought was very kind of like what we're trying to do in some sense. Like it's really niche. And then the other one that's come up is called Be Real, and Be Real is really fast. Yeah, Be Real is really fascinating. Be Real is like every day you're going to do one post, and this thing is going to like Be Real just notifies you. So it could be like at 7 a.m. And when it notifies you, you have a certain amount of time, and you have to open up your camera, open up your phone. You have to take it, and then you take a photo of your existing environment. I think it can be a video too. So it's going to use, it's made for the smartphone. So one is going to take the exterior camera of wherever you are, and then the other photo at the exact same time where the video is the personal or the selfie camera. So then both of those show up on your screen, and it really is about being real and like showing where you are. I don't think you can do
Be
as much
real. I
filtering.
dig that.
And I actually think this was an idea that Gary Vee had thrown out to somebody. And because Gary Vee, a long time, was like, you want $1 billion podcast idea? Have social media app. He's like, have an app where you can only share one photo or one video per day. That is
TikTok did it. So literally yesterday, I saw this for the first time yesterday. Under TikTok, under like you can view the For You page and the following page. And then across the bottom, there's a bunch of icons. And one of them is your friends. And that got released just a few weeks or months ago. And it was your friends, and it will filter out just people actually know. But then they at the top of that page, there's a thing called Now versus Feed. And now, and it blew me away because it did literally this. It's like, take a photo. And I took a photo and it was the other side of my camera. And I was like, what the crap? That's just my yard. And then it took up another camera of me. And I was like, what's going on? You know, I was like, what is this? And before I knew it, I had posted this under now. And you can only see other people's now if you posted a now. And so it's almost like a barrier to entry psychologically that triggers them, that I thought was brilliant. So I'd love to see how Be Real is handling this, but this goes back to the trouble with Clubhouse. This feature, you can't build a whole app around this feature unless it's like all encompassing, because the mega brands can immediately do it. And I don't know who did it first. Did Be Real do it? Did Gary Vee do it? Or did TikTok do it? I don't know who did it first. I don't know.
It does it, yeah. And on some point, when it comes to like, and Jay, I'm going to get back to the Web3 Podcast Network. This does circle back, but on some point, and this is a thing I brought up with you guys before. It's like, this is the thing my buddy always says whenever we talk about ideas. He's like, "That's really great, cool idea. How long does it take X, Y, and Z, $10 million and 5 coders to do?" And it's almost like in the world of social media, it doesn't really matter who does it first. It really amplifies the idea. It matters who does it best. Clubhouse is dead, right? Twitter Spaces is now here.
LinkedIn audio.
Snapchat dead, right? Everyone started doing stories. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok started doing them. So it's like when you think about, and now I want to go back to the Web3 Podcast Network. It's like, how far away? And I know like once, and this is the question I think we talked about in the chat, but it's like once Instagram and TikTok have a podcast feature where they just drag in your RSS feed and then allow people to see on your profile. Because right now I'm always like, oh, go listen to the podcast on Spotify. Dumb. Once I'm like, click here and you can see it, because if you're on Facebook, you can listen to podcasts. Your podcast, if you have your page, will populate in Facebook. You just have to connect your RSS feed. So it's so much easier for people. It's less friction. And we live in a world of less friction, right? We're always going to go towards less friction. So once Instagram says, okay. Because right now they have on your Instagram, I think you have up to like 6, and I'm opening up my Instagram, but you have up to 6 different. So here's my Instagram, my personal Instagram. Go ahead, follow me. But you have here, so I have my like posts, I have my reels, and then I have my tagged. But you can have 4 up to 5 things. I think I could have products I'm selling, and then the other one you can have is guides, the little map book. All they have to do is add another one that is just headphones. And if you have a podcast, you can just put up the audio right there, and it will sit there, and it will either be video, or it will have, something. It will just be like a static thing on the screen. And so my question for us with Web3 Podcast Network is, how do you build the Web3 Podcast Network in a way that Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube can't just take your idea before we've even gotten into a place with, a lot of monthly active users? And that's not an easy question to answer, but I think it's something we should really consider as we build in the open. How do we create something that is so innate that these other ones can't just come along and steal it? Because Grant's like, if your Clubhouse is just going to be basically community sourced live audio, well, Twitter Spaces is like, done. That's easy. We did that easy. Snapchat is just like, okay, done. Like, Twitter, Instagram and just doing its stories is like, okay, bye.
Allison just DM'd me. Allison just DM'd me. She's on Be Real, and she posted the Be Real.
No, and I think Be Real is really cool, and I think everyone should look at Vero as well. And I'm going to play with those. And so, anyways, I post that question to you guys. If anyone in the comments has any idea, I just think I think it's a really, really solid idea to think about. And I don't know if there's necessarily a silver bullet here, but if we can think about something,
I think there's a business principle here that Richard Branson brought out that's super, super important. But because that was podcast specific, I want to hand the mic to Jay and see if Jay has reflections before I get to that.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, Chad, and it makes sense, especially when you think about what Twitter did to Clubhouse. I mean, even Spotify did it. Like, they all ripped off Clubhouse, like, exactly. And just basically carbon copies of Clubhouse. But I think what helps you to make a difference, especially in the tech world, is like Allison is saying here. It's about, well, she says someone told her that recently Web3 is about story living and not storytelling. But it's I agree with that 100%. It's really the narrative that you have tied around your app or your product, right? And I think in our case, what would separate a W3 podcast app from just some other app just creating podcast is like what Netflix is doing with the original content. So when Netflix started doing original content, maybe like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago now. Before that, they were sort of billing themselves as this company that played well with cable. So it was like
Huh.
a companion to your cable box. But silently in
Mm-hmm.
the background, they were building out their own production services. So because they knew that the one thing that's going to separate them from cable is going to be that original content that you can't
Mhm.
find anywhere else, because you really can't compete with creativity. If you have that creativity, then it's really difficult for someone else to duplicate, unlike an app that's just code that can be easily duplicated.
Yeah. So to your question, Jarrett, and back to, and let's tie Allison's thought here too, which I fully dig. The idea of story living versus storytelling. This is evidence of the medium is the message. That marketer, Seth Godin, he wrote this, and this was a very interesting case study from a marketing perspective. He wrote this, and one of his books was called Purple Cow in the early 2000s. It's a small read. You can read it in one sitting. And what he said is, here's good marketing. Purple cow. All of us likely get the same image in our head. A dairy cow that instead of brown spots, it's got purple spots. We all pictured it. It's a distinct image. And what the book came in, the first 10,000 copies of this book came in a milk carton that had purple spots on it. And it was a product drop in the early 2000s, right?
Hmm.
And his point is, your placebo about the value of my book is wrapped up in the care I put in the medium. So the medium is the message, doesn't just mean, hey, it's not just good words. What it means is it actually impacts the person in a way different than even the creation of it. Like, this video is created in a certain way, and we're doing video, we're interacting with video, but when does that entirely transfer to Spotify when someone's just listening to it? So often, Jarrett, you've been good to say, hey, for those listening to this later, there's things that don't translate, but the medium then shifts and it creates a different message. So what if someone listens to this on 2X? It actually might feel a bit different. So I wanted to tie that in. And into Allison's point here, story living, not storytelling, circles back to Gary Vee's concept of don't market, document, which is what this Saturday building in the open has become. So now the medium of Web3, if you will, I put that in air quotes for those listening, has influenced us to talk about what we're building. And so is that what the market wants, or is the market learning that it wants to listen into a build process? And so I think the point you made about listening to the customer is more important than anything, because who actually cares? What we're realizing is people want to listen in as a group of dudes or gals or people are building something and are trying. They want to see that underdog try to build something. And I think we're listening to that and responding to that. And my last point about Richard Branson, I'll hand the mic to you guys, is this. There was a story Richard Branson once told, I think from his book, Losing My Virginity, great book. And he was telling the story, if I'm not mistaken, about him trying to launch Virgin Air. And when he was trying to launch Virgin Air, he realized that British Airways had their marketing budget was larger than the entire gross revenue of Virgin Air, right? And so he could not compete with this marketing. And he went to one of his mentors, kind of boo-hooing and crying in his milk a little bit about, I don't know what to do. They're beating me. And his mentor kind of shook him out of it and said, listen, what can you compete on? He said, we do high touch better than anyone. And at the time, if you were in New York or London and you had a flight, for a brief period of time, very few people remember this. I remember fables of it. They would pick you up in a limo and take you to the airport in a limo. And he said, I could do this, but like, I can't do that at scale. What am I going to do? And his mentor said this. He said, compete with what you can compete with until you're too big and can't afford that. And if you can compete at high touch, do that until you're too big. Right now, Alex Hormozy is not going to be on our show. He's too big for that. But there was a point where he could have competed on every single thing. Same with Gary Vee. Gary Vee used to attend every single request until he was too big for that. And so I think that, like, circling back to our podcast, I think we should own the Web3 podcast and then pivot very quickly to W3 podcast until it's just too big. But we have to be massively successful at what we know. And in this case, it's a niche. And I think the three of us know infopreneuring, speaking for me, podcasting for Jay, podcasting for Jarrett. I think that we can compete in that and deliver massive value in the info space, getting their business up and running. I think we can absolutely give you guys saw some of the infographics I've been using to train infopreneurs. Like, I think some of that stuff those tools are pretty useful if we could retool them for our audience of Web3 and messaging. So I don't know, that advice, that Richard Branson advice had always stuck with me. I don't know. Any reflections on that?
Jay, what you thinking?
I mean, it makes sense. Pulling it all together the way that you did in the end, where you start out with your niche and then you expand out. I think that 100% makes sense. Like the riches are in the niches, and then it's always fine to go beyond that. And it's like what you were saying earlier, Jared, in terms of where companies start out and where they end up. I mean, Amazon still sells books, but I think that's the last thing you think of when you think of Amazon, right?
Now,
I mean,
Jay, what's the first thing you think of when you think of Amazon?
My bedazzled
shipping.
sneakers.
I think of it as a shipping company. And like Nintendo sold playing cards. Do you know that before they got into gaming consoles?
I didn't know that.
I did not know that either.
Airbnb, the guys at Airbnb, you guys hear where they got their idea? They attended the Obama rally in New York City, and they were selling a cereal that was branded for the Democrats, and they also had a branded cereal for the Republicans. They were just going to shill whoever was winning and that merch. And so they had a bunch of these cereal boxes made up, and they couldn't find a place to stay. So they crashed on their friend's couch. And I think it was New York City or Washington, probably Washington, actually.
I think it was Seattle. I remember. Yeah,
really?
They were like creatives, architects, designers, or whatever. And they crashed on someone's couch, and they saw that this could be something you could monetize. Basically, they monetized couch surfing. Yeah. They said this community is super strong, and they monetized couch surfing. But I didn't know that they were originally shilling cereal.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it too, though, there was couchsurfing.com was a website. And I think they might have used it, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken.
They did. I think they early on, I think they did for sure.
And so you don't have to have a unique idea necessarily. You just need to do it a bit better, 1% better, you know? Yeah. So what do we think we're doing for people with W3 Podcast Network better? And this is someone getting a glimpse into the CEO suite of us actually debating this. Like, what are we doing better than other people equipping podcasters?
That's the question that I struggle with, because I think saying that we do story living, not storytelling, or whatever we want to say, is fine and dandy. But if you only have 2,000 monthly active users and Instagram drops in the RSS feed, you know, and podcasters just blow up on Instagram and TikTok, I don't think it matters. I don't know. Narratives are great, but I think they're lost to frictionless exchanges. That's my take. And that's like long-term, I just think adoption of anything. But I think some of the things that we have discussed, like I think the idea of micropayments would totally change things. Instead of having a subscription-based model, giving the power back to the person who's actually creating the content, that they can get paid in micropayments. You know, someone listens to your podcast and they pay you 2 cents to listen. That's way better, because right now Spotify, if you're getting paid through Spotify, you're getting paid 0.3 of a cent for every listen. So it's already orders of magnitude more that you're going to get paid directly. And Spotify's not taking stuff off the top. So I think that there are things that you could do that would be harder for the other bigger giants to maybe implement overnight, because I do believe long-term, no one's going to even remember. People, like some people will, like in 10 years, some people will remember Be Real. But if TikTok's already doing that, it's a matter of time before that's just kind of the new Clubhouse or the new Snapchat. But I
Jay,
could
what do
be
you
wrong.
think? Jay, what do you think to that? What do you think W3 Podcast Network is doing that either you haven't seen or better than what you're seeing that could remain competitive if something like Spotify or Instagram just launched a frictionless podcasting solution?
Yeah. I think there are some things that we are doing different, or that we could do different. Jared, I'd push back on what you were saying just a little bit, because there are some examples of companies that came up and did something that could be replicated, but they did it in such a way that um they weren't really taken seriously. And then when people started taking them seriously, they were already too big. Like, I think of
Mhm.
TikTok versus YouTube. Like, there's no reason why TikTok should have the number of viewers that it has over YouTube, because that was basically online video was basically YouTube's domain, right? You saw how quickly they were able to pivot to vertical video, and how well they've been able to do it. And it just shows you that they could have been doing this the entire time, but TikTok had been able to just to be able to dominate this niche that everyone thought was unprofitable. I think that's sort of it. You've got to figure out what your niche is, find a niche that maybe other people aren't as interested in, and just sort of work it until you can turn it into something that's really big. Unlike, a Clubhouse that didn't really have a way of keeping people in the app, because as soon as the hype died down, people just went away. There wasn't any real intrinsic value in Clubhouse, because you can duplicate those audio rooms anywhere. Essentially, there wasn't anything that they provided. But Grant, in terms of what we do, I really think it comes down to that creative storytelling. Like, how do you actually deliver the medium in a way that it attracts people and it is attractive to them? One thing that I've been thinking about, Jared, to maybe complement the micropayments idea, is this idea of, as a listener, you should be able to have a say in the direction that the story goes. So you can't do this with
I love it.
so you cool. You can't do it with traditional podcasting. No, like, it just isn't possible, because the apps don't have the capability. But what if you were in an app and you were listening, and the first 5 minutes of the episode went by and you're really loving it, and then they break and they say, okay, it's your decision now to choose where the story goes. Does the hero
Jeez.
go down path A or go down path B? And in your app, you can say, okay, path B, let's keep going. I want to see what happens if they do that. And you sort of almost like putting yourself plus the story to see what direction it takes. I think that's something that maybe you could
I wonder how
replicate the
fast it
tech,
would get
but
dirty.
What?
what?
I just wonder, like,
Grant is like the uncle at Thanksgiving dinner who you have to be like, well, I wonder what Grant's going to say today.
I mean, but it's like choose your own adventures. And
Exactly.
so are you saying these paths would be pre-recorded and binary, like A or B? Or do you saying like the talent would be talented enough to like live Allison's like, I want to hear about this, and suddenly we're talking about bead making in Chennai. I mean, I don't know.
No,
Like,
it's definitely pre-recorded. Like, do you remember those Goosebumps books, like Choose Your Own
yeah.
Adventure? Yeah,
Yes.
it's like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I had a ton of choose your own adventure.
That's what I was going to bring up, because I remember as a little kid in middle school, and they're like trying to get everyone to read, and you would go for like book day, and books were the coolest thing on the planet because like the internet didn't exist. And those Goosebumps choose your own ending, people would like fight for them. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what it made me think of. And I think that there's those type of things that I think would be brilliant. But actually, when you said it, I wasn't even thinking of pre-recorded content. It's crazy how that one thing we all had 3 different ideas. Grant, you went to, they're somehow doing it live, and it's like, whose line is it anyway? Jay's thinking it's pre-recorded. I'm thinking after a week, the
Yeah.
one episode drops every month, then you get to vote, and then they
Yeah.
have to go and create that storyline for the next month's episode. So you actually get to influence the direction of the podcast, and you get to see real time. Okay, 500 people listened. It's 251 to 249 votes, path A over path B. And then the creators literally have to go back and they have to create that before the next month's drop. That's what I was thinking. But I love how we all took it in different ways. One was live, one was pre-recorded, and one was no, this will change the path. And I want to go back to your TikTok because I think it's a really, really good example to push back against my idea to say, no, like YouTube was dominating video. This thing came out and they did short format video and they're still rocking and they're actually doing their own thing. And I think in some sense, TikTok right now is definitely obviously blowing like their adoption rate's way higher than YouTube. Part of that's because YouTube's been around for 16, 17 years and it can only grow so much, month on month. But that's a really, really good example. And so I think taking these lessons forward of, how do we be the TikTok? Because like when you start to talk about audio, I think the big Googles in the room are gotta be, well, Google Podcast is one, but Spotify and Apple. And it's like, how do you keep people away from Spotify and Apple? And so I want to go to the idea you talked about with Clubhouse. The reason why Clubhouse didn't stick, I think you're totally right, is after you went and listened to Not Crypto Bros on Clubhouse, you left because you're like, okay, that's done. I'm done. I don't need to get any more value from that. But I think that's the question for a Web3 podcast network. After someone even listens to their really cool narrative and they've just gotten to choose their own ending or they got to vote and choose their own ending, how do you then, and then I see Allison's got a really good question. How do you then keep them on the app? What's the thing that's keeping them on the app? Because right now with Spotify, I listen to my podcasts and then I get off the app. I'm not spending time like, oh, I wonder what the new vegan cooking thing is because that interests me. Or the vegan cooking thing isn't just coming up because the algorithm is putting it in front of my face. And now I'm on the app like TikTok for 7 hours and, and then I'm lying in bed and I miss my Not Crypto Bros, 6:30 kickoff. So what is the thing that is going to keep people on the Web3 podcast network, similar to the way TikTok keeps you kind of involved?
I mean,
and then we'll get to Allison. Allison has a great point. So
yeah, Flinch is doing that. You buy an NFT and can determine the film, or you can buy a character and determine what the character does. And what's interesting about that is like, I immediately ballooned, Jarrett, both your idea and Allison's idea, where like in Allison's idea, what if, everyone's concerned, we have, now that we've gone to proof of stake with Ethereum, the only real fear is what about validators hijacking the direction of the whale validators hijacking. So in this case, what if I just owned all the characters and started like making everyone dance puppy dance? But
you'd be a rich psycho.
You'd be a rich psycho. But like, if you think about the Choose Your Own Adventure podcast, like what about the stories? Like in one way, that's the ultimate feedback loop. I'm listening to my users. So I have even written this story to reflect the user's desires. But what about the type of storytelling that surprise and delights or surprise and terrifies or upsets the clients to disrupt or to say something societally? So everyone in the comments is like, I want the couple to end up together, love forever. But the author, in maybe Jay's case, the author wants to tell something, a different angle. And so it's kind of tricky. Like in Allison's example, like what if you as a creator, the medium here is now dictating the message, but overbearingly. So where is craft? And if you did it this way, those projects are cool for those who want the satisfaction of dictating as a group where the story goes, or discovering as a group where the story goes. But artists who think they have a voice would veer away from this. I don't want that. I have a voice that I'm trying to express. But to your last question, and Jay, you could interrupt me here. To your last question, in this world of overabundant content, podcasting aside, YouTube aside, TikTok aside, I have a pervading, like forget crypto even. Like as a business owner, what I've observed as a founder and an entrepreneur, what I've started to see is this. When you have an oversupply, people's bullshit meter gets dialed up and their quality requirement gets dialed up. They go, okay, I've watched over 10,000 TikToks and now I kind of know what I want. What is that? it's the same as when they say, now I've watched 1,000 Joe Rogan videos and 1,000 alt-right videos, and now I know what I want to do. And they start to, their viewership starts to tank other than confirmation bias. This happens in nearly every medium of content. Books. When was the last time I had actually read a business book? I've gotten what I want. I know my frameworks. I'm done. I don't need to read too much more, except now I'm into marketing a little bit. Here's what I think. Brand and journey. How strong is the brand and the support services? But that's the hook to get them in, because anyone can replicate that when you have a frictionless system. So journey, what these systems aren't doing, what tech is doing is, here's frictionless. But what they're not doing is what one thing Jay said is great storytelling. So if Jay can come in and go, here is a roadmap for great storytelling. And similarly, what I think I offer to us as the three of us kind of shape this idea further, building it in the open, is now let's show them how to make the business of this. Jay can speak to the podcasting business, but I could speak to like fundamental business principles. And not just in tidbits and nuggets, but in a path 0 to 600,000, 6-figure podcast. When you have the reason those things sell more than how to do a podcast, the reason 6-figure podcast sells better than that linguistically is that one promises a path, the other promises a set of skills. And I can just freaking go to YouTube University. I don't freaking care. Someone show me how to get to a place, to a destination. Does that make sense? At least that's my opinion. But Jay, I'll now pass it over to you because you're the real OG here on some of this.
No, I 100% get what you're saying. There was something I was thinking about. Now I've lost the thought. But
was it a reflection on Jay's comment or Jared's comments or mine?
I think it was on yours. But Jared, why don't you go and then come back to me and see if I can figure out what I was thinking.
Pull it back up.
Yeah, because I think one of the things we were talking about, and then I think Allison's honestly great addition, just put us in a different direction. And I love the idea of determining your own, buying up all the characters and the NFTs. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm excited to see what Web3 does with choose your own ending type stories. And it looks like this Flinch is already doing it. So Jay, my question to you, and maybe I think you had an answer, but I'm not sure, was how do you keep people on the W3 Podcast Network app? How do you keep them close to the fire once they're done with that initial and kind of engagement? They've come on to listen to Not Crypto Bros, for example, and then they're done. How do you keep them close to the fire? Because that is really what TikTok has done, and they may have even done that. TikTok has probably done that better than any social media app we've seen thus far.
Yeah, I think that's maybe what I was thinking about. When you think about it from the perspective of the creator, I think what keeps you on the TikTok app is knowing that you can get followers and seeing your follower count increase as you continue. So it shows like you have something invested in this particular app.
Yeah.
From the side of the viewer, of just a person who's viewing and not necessarily creating any content, I think the draw there is basically like the voyeurism, right? Like you're looking into somebody else's life without them knowing that you're looking into their life. And I think when I started having that thought, it made me think of all the different people that I've worked with to help them to start their podcast and what those podcasts eventually look like. And again, I think this is sort of jogging my memory back to what you were saying. So like like in the beginning with MySpace and Hi-Fi.
I love this. Jay, first of all, I love how you talked about it like it's the Bible. In the beginning, day one, there was MySpace.
Have you seen that meme?
You shall connect.
Have you seen that meme with Lord of the Rings, and it's the elf guy, and he's like, I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago. And it's just this meme going around when people say comments like this. Okay, sorry, go ahead, please. Proceed.
You're totally right, though.
Yeah, so it initially, to be popular on these sites, like you really have to do much. Like you just needed to have a really cool photo and like some interesting information about yourself, and that was really all that it took. and then Facebook got more popular, and then you started posting memes, and you started writing blogs, and that's what made you popular. And then Instagram got popular, and then that was more like for high quality photos. If your photos look great, so you with each new layer of social media, you had to take the creativity up another notch. So I think that eventually happens with podcasting as well. Like it's fine to
Interesting.
sort of do the interview style podcast that we all know about, but like that interview technique, that's been around for what, like maybe 50 years. Like when you think back to
Oh
like
yeah.
late night TV shows, Johnny
Yeah.
Carson and stuff like that, they had that interview format locked down. I think podcasting becomes something very different going forward. Like the medium still exists, but the apps eventually allow you to do some different things. So like I'm talking about, cinematic storytelling with spatial audio. But maybe there's like the choose your own adventure. Maybe there's like, you know, just like TikTok did like micro videos. Maybe there's like micro audio, and then we layer on micro payments on top of that, Jared. But I think it's like having what keeps you there is if you're able to have these experiences with audio that are different from what you can experience in other places. And that just allows you to stay in that loop.
So I want to go, Grant. I'm sorry, I want to go here. So
No,
you
go, go,
just
go.
can you say exactly what you said again? The last thing. The reason why you stay is because there's things you can't get from other places. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's an idea for W3 Podcast Network. It's Biddo. That's the name of the. That's the name.
Build in the open. Okay.
And it's just an entrepreneur network where you get to surf around and you just get to go look at other people, and they're live streaming these type of conversations that would normally be not in the open. And it's for VCs, investors, and also anyone curious, because I would have loved to have been in on conversations of early Airbnb, because I'm sure they were just trying to like, oh, are people actually going to do this? Like the reason why couch surfing works is because there's no legality, because say something bad happens, et cetera, et cetera. When someone's at a house, then it's tied to us. So that would be an interesting idea. And maybe not Web3. I mean, maybe it goes in that direction, maybe it doesn't. But if you just created a platform where it's just live streaming video, where people, it's called Biddo, Build in the Open, where people are just talking about what they're building. And it's a lot more intentional. So it takes the best of Twitch, which is the live stream. It has that voyeurism entertainment that I think YouTube has. It kind of has like what OnlyFans have. Like you don't just have to do sex on OnlyFans. You can do a bunch of different stuff, but like you could be cooking and it takes you 5 hours to make, but people love watching you sit there. You're like, yep, we're still waiting for this shit to braise. It's in the oven. So that's a very interesting idea to make the Web3 Podcast Network just be what we're already doing right now, which is building in the open. And so you sign up, you tell us about your project, and then you just get in, and it's just video. And maybe you have a 2-hour max, and people can come in and watch you, and they can interact, and they can ask you questions. But you're only there. It's not pitching. You're not pitching at all. You're just internally talking about what you're building.
Either shaping the idea, and you should be required. The only requirement really is that you have to have takeaway actions as like a pseudo soft board meeting or alignment meeting. Like, hey, what are you going to be held accountable to? And it creates this little bit of a cliffhanger for the next episode of people going, hey, how did that go? And people are like, hey, what happened to that one thing? Oh, it fell off. I mean, that's good data, for the theme you're talking about.
Yeah, and what I would think, just to keep people coming back, is that when you're on, you can only watch people live. So when it's done, it doesn't, like, your profile doesn't stack up all of these days. You can export that and upload it to YouTube, or upload it to TikTok, or upload it to other things that then push you back here. But you're like, we only go live here, and you can only come on here if you're interested in what we're doing.
It's like a delayed live. So they can't go sit on YouTube and watch it live. It all goes live after the live.
Yeah, it gets uploaded, exactly, not in real time. You can only watch it live in app, something like that. But it's based on people building in the open, and based on what Gary Vee says, don't create, document.
Yeah.
That's just an interesting kind of riff off what we've been talking about.
So let's give some of that meat, because I think we've touched on a lot of killer topics, but let's get some meat on these bones, because if Saturday is at all about talking about small business, which we have, and we had other stuff, client values, profit taking, all this other stuff, what are we going to be working on this week? What do we absolutely need to absolutely get done this week for what we're building? Or what clarity do we need to obtain?
Jay, you want to go?
Well, I mean, yeah, we had some takeaways from the last meeting. Grant, I don't even know if you saw this. I sent you a message asking. Oh, I think you actually sent me the links that I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sent the Canva
Yeah.
thing. I saw that last night.
Yeah, so I think that the main thing is sort of doing that Canva workflow that you had for us, figuring out like what are the tasks, what are the not the tasks, like the revenue streams that we want to tackle first. You know, even though it's 3 of us now, you still can't sort of do everything, and some things are short term, some things are long term, and we probably have that conversation about like what's the immediate direction that we're going to go in.
Yeah. Yeah. What were some of the biggest takeaways? And then we can kind of shift gears here. What were some of the biggest takeaways from this week that now that you've had a minute to sit on it, whether it was one of our private meetings, whether it was something we did on the show, about the direction of the W3 Podcast Network? What is something that's like, you know what, we said this and that's sticking with me? I definitely think, and that's a component. Go ahead, Jared.
Oh, I don't have an answer for this. I'm
Oh.
not exactly sure what I'm all over the place. I think the idea just through out Bido is actually not a bad idea, because I think people would jump all over it. Because if it's just highly
He's like,
focused
I'm
on
off of this,
building
guys.
the
I'm
open-
out. I'm doing Bido.
No, I think it's an extension of what we're trying to do. I mean, Jay says we want to
Mhm.
create content that you can't get anywhere else, and that's why people come to it.
Mhm.
I'm still not convinced podcasts are maybe the ones to do, only because if I have a podcast, like I have More Than Blockchain, I'm not going to ever make it exclusive to an app that is growing. I'm still going to have it on Spotify and Apple. And so you can still go get that content other places. Till you have exclusivity, I think it gets kind of funky, because then someone's like, well, why would I download that app if I could listen to it on Spotify? And that's where we build in some of the other value add that I think we've discussed even today. Like, you can't choose your own ending if that's something you want to do. Like, that's just not going to happen on Spotify, but you can do that on the W3 Podcast Network. But if it's more like you're saying, Johnny Carson, kind of an interview, you know, even this podcast, would we just exclusively put this podcast on an app that only like 100 people have downloaded? You know, I think that the exclusivity of where the RSS feed sits is an interesting thing to kind of wrap our brains around. And that's where I think micropayments may push creators to really think about and push their audience to go listen to it on this app. You know, instead of having the Patreon model, instead of being like, yeah, you know, join my Discord and get exclusive access to me or whatever. It's like, no, just, you want to support me, download this app. It's super simple. In 2 clicks, you create your profile, and you can, you know, if you have a MetaMask, you're just going to connect it, and you can just, you know, each episode's 2 cents, and that will do me a world of great thanks. Wow, 2 cents. That's awesome. Because there's some creators that I follow that I like want to give them props because I've gotten so much value from them, but I don't know how to do that without signing up for their, like, you know, $39.99 a month Patreon. And then I have to go to all these live streams. And Grant, what you were saying, then I feel like I have to engage to get my value, when I don't think that we live in a world where that's always as easy. So
Interesting.
I just see Jay is thinking now. So,
well, but I think, I don't think anyone's talking about exclusivity. So the question is that the pervading question that I heard there is, why not just go listen to it on Spotify? And then we try to solve that with maybe a tech or an economic incentive, this mechanism you're talking about, which I do agree with. But in the early days, I come back to the Richard Branson thing. What can we compete on? Not because it's ultimate, but because we know
Morning,
we need to. We need to
What's
know
up,
how to
Austin?
read the room. Good morning, sir. And what I think the W3 Podcast Network does is, it first and foremost is a brand that people can go to. So yes, I could get your podcast in one place, but remember, this original idea was, but I don't want to have to sift through Spotify. I just want to go to a place that's branded. Then building on top of that, I really think this is where W3 Podcast can attract creators, because we're offering them not just the W3 Podcast Network, we're offering them what's under the hood, a map of how to get to. I know I don't mean it this way, but the 6-figure podcast, we actually do the underlying infopreneuring training for those in that ecosystem. Maybe not all the people listed in the W3 Podcast Network have gone through our coaching and our training, but I think a lot of them have. And A, the quality of the storytelling should be higher, but B, they should be a more business savvy group. That will attract the initial creators and build up the war chest for then us to iterate on micropayments where we actually have features and benefits that actually are technologically helpful. But I don't think there's a push for exclusivity. I think, in fact, the opposite. We should encourage them to be everywhere because that's what's called risk reversal in sales. The risk is on us to provide extraordinary value to creators and listeners. And I think go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Grant, if I can cut you off, that's the thing. You asked, like, what am I left with after a couple of conversations? The Wednesday conversation, the Tuesday, Wednesday, I mean, we've been connecting all week is two things. How do you keep people on the app so it's not Clubhouse, so it's a TikTok, so that way they're continuing to engage, which I think is the initial idea of the Web3 network, which is like, it's all, like you said, Grant, it's all concentrated. So that's why you go there. And then the other one is, how do you keep creators? Because that's the other brilliance of TikTok. You can get on TikTok and make 50 videos, and all of a sudden you could have a lot more attention than if you'd made those same 50 videos on YouTube or Instagram. And so I think that those are also some really sound ideas. And Grant, excuse me, and Austin throws out, what about listen to earn? I actually think we should shelf that for our next conversation, only because we are 10 minutes over our normal time. But I wanted to get Jay's takeaway on kind of where he is right now.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think like we're putting out a lot of ideas, and I think where we're moving in the right direction. It's really about figuring out like which one of these things are we going to tackle first. Like some of them, rightfully like long-term visions. Like okay, this is something that we probably pull off in a year, and then some of them are like, oh, okay, we could pull that off in a month. Like we can get training courses up and running in like a couple of weeks, right? And then maybe it takes us a little longer to really figure out how micropayments work and what's the best way of launching that in an app. But yeah, I think at the end of it, it just really comes down to prioritization. For me, I think of like prioritizing revenue, like how do you make the most revenue quickly, and then sort of expand, then use that revenue to expand into the other areas to then allow you to build community and really build up the moat that allows you to separate yourself from the competition.
Yeah, and this is where I think the courses and the path and the undergirding business is not even a big chunk, and it's not even an entire war chest. I think it's just enough to incentivize development and building in the open. It's like, okay, I think brand is going to be huge. I think being documentarians of launching others. So I think you go to Spotify. Well, why doesn't everyone just hover at Spotify versus W3 Podcast Network? Yeah, okay, it's a collection of crypto and W3 podcasts, but these people also launch me. It's a launch pad. How do we become a launch pad that helps people build their roadmaps? Like if we were a launch pad for crypto, we'd have a suite of tools and services. I think that idea, starting with the education part, because that's the easiest thing to build. But again, that's just a lily pad we're hopping to get to a firmer rock in the middle of the pond. And that would be, our actual, whether it's the 30-day challenge, whether it's the cohorts of helping people shape and refine their message with a mission. And I think we have to remember mission. And we didn't touch on this. And Jarrett's called us out. We really should transition today for the sake of time. I think that we need to get down to mission. What's our mission? Because this is that Richard Branson, Virgin Air versus British Airways. At some point, you have to say, my mission is to entertain people. So screw even paying attention to British Airways. Screw paying attention to Spotify at some point. And let's talk about the mission. And to me, the reason I like being involved in this is it so parallels my personal mission of launching people's voice. And I think that if we had some sort of mission like that and we built a suite of tools for that, Spotify is like, here, publish your content along with everybody else. We're like, come to us and we're going to help you nurture your voice.
Yeah, Spotify's played out. I'm
Sure.
surprised. I'll be by 2026. I'll be surprised if they have the market share they do. I've not heard really. I mean, it's just not there. But seriously, let's transition. We are 14 minutes over. Austin, we're gonna pick up in your idea on Tuesday if that's cool. And it's not out of not wanting to thank you and give the proper space right now. We definitely will do that Tuesday. So please check in Tuesday because everything you're talking about is part and parcel of the conversation, and we need to address what you've just said because it
Because it's
really
going to be
plays a
critical
part.
to the roadmap. We've already
Exactly.
talked it's where it's at on the roadmap, and I think we want to share that with you, Austin, big time.
So I'm gonna start doing some shout outs. My
Yeah.
shout out today is for everyone in the comments. If you are stateside, it is right, bright, and early. And thank you for joining us. And what else? I feel like I had another shout out, but maybe come back to me at the end, then I'll shout out the socials. Jay, you want to go next?
Yeah, I want to shout out. There's this group that I hang out with. I found them on LinkedIn. It's Grace Gong's Crypto Club. Grace Gong
I'm
does a podcast. She's a podcaster, and she does a podcast with John Kraske. If you're on LinkedIn and in Web3,
Yep.
you probably know John. Um, but we're in this group, and we meet up every week, and we just sort of like talk about crypto, talk about what's happening in the news, and it's been pretty cool. I think we've been doing it for like the last 4 months. And we last time we met, which was yesterday, we decided that one of the things we're going to do as a group is launch a coin, just as like an experiment to see what it's like to launch a coin, and then we're going to build it in the open so everybody who's in the group can participate and see what it's all about, what it's like. We don't have like any real intentions for like what happens to the coin afterwards. Maybe something comes of it, but we're just going to do it as an experiment. And I thought, it's a pretty cool thing. So I wanted to shout out everyone who's in the group. Shout out Grace Gong, and share that with the listeners. Maybe people want to join in.
I appreciate that. I'll have to dive into some of these groups. I'm going to shout out Polygon Network. I've been looking into Polygon over the last day or so, and people view them as a layer 2 solution. They're not. They're a layer 0 that happens to focus on Ethereum, and they have grown in their robustness. I don't even know the personalities around Polygon, though I should now. They're trading at around 76 cents, give or take, but I think I'm going to start stacking Polygon because they have their own side chain generator tool. You can create your own chain. So technically they're a layer 0. They're a layer 1 to Ethereum because they don't borrow Ethereum security. You're a layer 2 when you borrow the parent chain security protocols. And so I started really looking at Polygon, and I'm thinking their income model is sound. They have the second largest number of active users, second to Ethereum only right now. And they're low key. They're not caught up in drama. So I believe it or not, I'm shouting out the Polygon network.
Grant, I absolutely love that. I posted this week about Polygon because they're doing so much development with so many different things. And maybe we could talk
Starbucks.
about this on Tuesday, talk about the learn to earn in Polygon. And I think that
Yeah.
they'll go over $20 a coin, which is more than 20x by 2025, by summer of 2025. I said that this week on Twitter a couple times. So that's great. I forgot who I was going to do the shout out. I think the shout out is just going to be generally for LinkedIn. Anyone on LinkedIn who's kind of following us, because
Yeah.
LinkedIn's been a great place for all of us to build in the open, share
Yeah.
what we're up to. Follow us on LinkedIn at Not Crypto Bros. We're
Mm.
almost to our 150 mark. We need to get there so we can start to live stream through there. Also follow us on Twitter and YouTube, and we will see you on Tuesday at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. Ciao.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.